He's a delivery driver suffocating under $73,000 of debt, racing against app timers for tips that won't even cover gas. He's Chicago's most feared mafia boss, a man who controls the underworld through five-star restaurants and doesn't tolerate witnesses. One freezing Tuesday night, his private dinner becomes a death trap. The only one who can save him isn't his armed security team. It's her. But this isn't a rescue story. His reaction to being saved isn't gratitude. It's erasure. And the payment he offers her isn't money she can keep. It's a threat, a bribe to disappear, and an impossible choice that will drag her into the deadliest empire in Chicago. The cold biting through Alvera Bridgman's jacket wasn't just Chicago winter. It was a punishment. It was the kind of February cold that turned her breath into white clouds as she gripped the steering wheel of her 2008 Honda Civic, held together with duct tape, prayer, and the fading hope that the check engine light was lying. The Crimson Rose wasn't a place for duct-taped cars. It was a downtown Chicago fortress of marble and velvet ropes, where Bentleys idled at the valet stand and politicians whispered deals over $400 stakes. Alvera, 23, was invisible in this world. Her job was to be quick, unnoticed, and gone before anyone registered her face, all while carrying the suffocating mathematics of survival. That math was $73,000 in student loan debt from a nursing degree she couldn't finish when her mother got sick. It was choosing between her phone bill and her diabetic father's insulin. It was 16-hour days across 3 delivery apps, swallowing insults from customers who'd rate her 1 star because traffic made her 3 minutes late. Bridgman, you're up for Crimson Rose. $400 order. $50 tip, the app notification chirped. $50. Enough for her father's medication this week. The service entrance smelled like truffle oil and desperation. A sous chef barely glanced at her. Main dining room. Center table. VIP wants it presented directly. Her chest tightened. Through the swinging doors, the world changed. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across tables draped in white linen. Every eye pivoted toward her as she walked, cheap sneakers squeaking against marble, her stained jacket announcing poverty in a room where fortunes were discussed between courses. Center table. Silver hair, granite features, tattoos creeping up his neck. Wilbert Edwards sat like a king, 6 men flanking him in suits that cost more than her car. The bulges under their jackets weren't phones. The man to Edwards' right, massive, with a neck tattoo reading Reaper, watched her with eyes that promised consequences. She set down the bags with shaking hands. Edwards cut into the steak, lifted the first bite to his mouth, chewed once, then his hand shot to his throat. His face drained to purple. The fork clattered. His hands clawed at his collar. The 6 armed men froze, paralyzed by their boss's impossible vulnerability. Edwards' chair scraped backward, his body convulsing as he fought for air. The restaurant manager materialized, Vincent Rossi, fury in his eyes. You? Leave immediately. This is... Alvera's nursing training roared back. 60 seconds before brain damage. Her body moved. She dropped the bags and rushed behind Edwards, hands locking around his torso. The Reaper reached for her, but she was already thrusting upward.
1.
Edwards jerked. Nothing.
2.
Her arm screamed. The room held its breath. Nothing. 3. She put everything into it, every unpaid bill, every ounce of desperation. Something dislodged with a wet sound and shot from Edwards' mouth onto the white tablecloth. Edwards gasped, sucking oxygen like heat surfaced from drowning. Purple receded to red to normal. The silence that followed was the silence of a bomb that hadn't exploded. Edwards turned his head slowly. His eyes found hers, dark, burning, assessing. He didn't speak, didn't thank her. He just stared with an intensity that made her want to vanish. Iron fingers clamped around her bicep. The Reaper. Marcus Kane. His grip was professional, efficient, merciless. He yanked her backward. Wait. I just saved. You just made a very big mistake. Not a threat.
A fact.
Rossi appeared, face twisted with rage. You assaulted a guest. You're banned from this restaurant, and I'll personally blacklist you from every delivery platform in Chicago. You'll never work again. He was dying. You think people like us need help from people like you? Rossi's lip curled. You saw something you shouldn't have. You were somewhere you don't belong. Kane dragged her through the kitchen toward the back exit. You witnessed a vulnerable moment. That makes you a liability. He shoved open the door, cold rushing in. You saw faces. You heard names. You got close to someone you had no business touching. I saved him.
Yeah.
Kane pushed her into the alley, the door already closing. That's the problem. The lock clicked. Alvera stood alone in the freezing dark, hands still shaking from adrenaline and the impossible wrongness of it all. She saved a man's life, and they treated her like a criminal. If you believe saving a life should never be punished, hit subscribe. Only cold-hearted snakes won't. The alley behind the Crimson Rose smelled like rotting vegetables and broken dreams. Alvera stumbled against the brick wall, her arms still throbbing where Kane had gripped it, her mind trying to process what had just happened. The steel door stood closed like a verdict. You don't belong. You never belonged. You were a fool to think saving someone's life would matter. The door burst open again. Vincent Rossi stormed out, his phone already in his hand, camera pointed at her face. The flash went off before she could turn away. That's for the police report, he said, circling around her like a predator. Another flash, her license plate. Trespassing. Assault. Harassment of a guest. Take your pick. He stepped closer, his cologne expensive enough to make her throat close. You think you're some kind of hero? You think you get to put your filthy hands on someone like Mr. Edwards and just walk away? I saved his life. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, swallowed by the alley's acoustics and her own disbelief. You interfered with private business. You witnessed something you had no right to see. Rossi's smile was surgical. By tomorrow morning, every delivery platform in Chicago will have your photo flagged. DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, all of them. You'll be blacklisted from every restaurant in the city. And if you even think about talking to anyone, journalists, police, your little gig worker friends, I'll make sure you never work anywhere again. Are we clear? Alvera wanted to scream, to fight, to demand justice from a universe that clearly didn't traffic in it. But she'd learned long ago that people like Rossi didn't lose arguments with people like her. She nodded, hating herself for it. Good. Rossi turned back toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Miss Bridgman? If Mr. Edwards or anyone associated with him has any complications from tonight, we know where you live. We know where your father gets his dialysis. Think about that before you do anything stupid.
The door closed.
The lock clicked. Alvera stood alone with her bleeding pride and the $50 tip she'd never receive. The drive home took 23 minutes. She counted every one of them, watching her delivery apps like they were life support monitors. At a red light on Western Avenue, the first notification appeared. Your DoorDash account has been temporarily suspended pending review of customer complaints. Then Uber Eats. Then Grubhub. All within 5 minutes. Rossi hadn't been bluffing. By the time she pulled up to her building, a 3-story walk-up in Bridgeport with peeling paint and a front door that never quite locked, the reality had crystallized into something sharp enough to cut. She'd just lost her only source of income. Her father's insulin cost $340 a month. Rent was due in 12 days. The electric bill was already 2 months overdue. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like it led deeper underwater. Apartment 2B. The door stuck like it always did. Inside, the television flickered blue, light across her father's face. Thomas Bridgman looked up from his recliner, the oxygen cannula snaking from his nose to the concentrator humming in the corner. Hey, baby. How was the shift? Alvera forced a smile that felt like pushing a boulder uphill.
Fine.
Good tips tonight. The lie tasted like copper. That's my girl. He turned back to the game show, his breathing labored even with the oxygen. He didn't notice her hands shaking. He didn't see the tears she blinked back. In her room, barely bigger than a closet, mattress on the floor, clothes hanging from a tension rod, Alvera sat in the dark and let herself break. Silent, ugly crying, the kind that left her ribs aching and her throat raw. She'd done everything right. She'd saved a man's life. And somehow, that had been the wrongest thing she could have done. Her phone buzzed with a final insult. Your account access has been revoked. For questions, please contact support. No number. No explanation. Just digital erasure, as efficient as Kane's grip on her arm. She thought about her mother, who died 2 years ago drowning in medical debt, who'd made Elvira promise to take care of Thomas, to keep fighting, to never give up. But what did fighting look like when the system was designed to crush you for having a conscience? Elvira didn't sleep. She lay on her mattress, watching shadows move across the ceiling, doing the math that had no good answers. 12 days until rent. 4 days until her father ran out of insulin. No income. No prospects. No justice. The morning came gray and pitiless. Elvira's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with an email from her building manager. Rent payment now 3 days late. Please remit immediately or vacate premises within 30 days per lease agreement. She hadn't even realized she'd missed last month's payment. The juggling act was finally failing. Eviction wasn't a possibility anymore. It was inevitable. And all because she'd saved a dying man who apparently didn't want to be saved by someone like her. 3 days of digital rejection. Elvira had applied to 47 jobs: retail, warehouses, call centers, anything with a pulse and a paycheck. Every application disappeared into the void. Her references weren't returning calls. The 2 interviews she'd managed to schedule were mysteriously canceled hours before she was supposed to show up. Someone was making sure she stayed unemployable. She sat at her kitchen table, a card table from Goodwill with one wobbly leg, refreshing her email for the 100th time when the knock came. Not the polite knock of a neighbor. The kind of knock that said the door was a courtesy, not a barrier. Elvira opened it to find Marcus Kane filling her doorframe like a storm cloud, 2 men flanking him in dark suits with a dead-eyed stillness of professional violence. Kane didn't ask permission. He simply walked in, his eyes scanning her apartment with the clinical assessment of someone cataloging weaknesses. The enforcers followed, positioning themselves by the door. Exit blocked. Miss Bridgman. Kane's voice was flat, transactional. He placed a black leather briefcase on her card table with a solid thunk that made the wobbly leg shudder. Mr. Edwards asked me to deliver this personally. Elvira's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't want. Open it. Not a request. Her hands shook as she clicked the latches. The briefcase opened to reveal neat stacks of $100 bills, rubber-banded and pristine, and a single document clipped to the lid. The money smelled like ink and power. More money than she'd ever seen in one place. The document's header read, Mutual Non-Disclosure Agreement. Kane pulled out her chair, an invitation that felt like a command. $15,000 cash. The document is simple. You sign, acknowledging you'll never speak about what happened at the Crimson Rose. Not to journalists, not to police, not to friends over drinks. You take the money, move to another city, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, anywhere that isn't Chicago, and you forget you ever met Wilbert Edwards. And if I don't? The words scraped out of her throat. Kane's expression didn't change. Then we'll assume you're planning to talk to the wrong people. Federal agents. Prosecutors. Maybe write a book about your heroic rescue of a known criminal. He leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the money. This is the only offer you'll get, Miss Bridgman. Mr. Edwards appreciates what you did. He's not an ungrateful man. But you witnessed a vulnerable moment. You saw faces. You heard names. That makes you a liability that needs to be resolved. This is the resolution where you walk away alive and comfortable. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Elvira looked at the money. Enough to pay her father's insulin for a year, to clear her most urgent debts, to buy time. Enough to make her disappear into some smaller city where she could be invisible again, safe again. Enough to purchase her silence about being punished for saving a man's life. Something inside her cracked. Not broke, sharpened. She'd spent 23 years making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient for people who treated her like furniture. She'd swallowed every insult, accepted every injustice, perfected the art of being disposable. And where had it gotten her? Broke, blacklisted, threatened in her own home by men who thought $15,000 could buy her integrity. Alvera stood. She picked up the briefcase, heavy with cash and contempt, and threw it at Kane's feet. Bills scattered across her threadbare carpet like wounded birds. The enforcers' hands moved to their jackets, but Kane held up one finger.
Wait.
I'm not signing away my integrity for blood money. Her voice shook, but she didn't care. I saved a human being because it was the right thing to do. Not because I wanted a reward. Not because I wanted to be part of whatever world you people live in. I don't want anything from him except to be left alone. So take your money, take your threats, and get out of my home. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold, or if she'd just signed her own death warrant. Kane stared at her, his expression shifting from stone-faced menace to something that looked disturbingly like surprise. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Something darker. Amusement mixed with respect, like watching a mouse bare its teeth at a wolf. Well. Kane bent down, picked up the briefcase, began methodically collecting the scattered bills with movements that were almost meditative. You just made things very interesting, Miss Bridgman. He straightened, briefcase repacked, and moved toward the door. The enforcers parted for him. At the threshold, Kane paused. The boss will want to meet you himself. I don't want to meet him. I don't think that's your decision anymore. Kane's voice carried something that might have been a warning, or might have been advice. When Wilbert Edwards wants to meet someone, they get met. The only question is whether they walk into that meeting or get carried.
The door closed.
The lock clicked. Alvera stood in her apartment surrounded by the empty space where $15,000 had briefly lived, wondering if she'd just chosen dignity over survival, or if sometimes they were the same thing. The job interview at the Walmart distribution center lasted 7 minutes. The manager took one look at her application, made a phone call Alvera wasn't supposed to hear, and told her the position had just been filled.
She knew what that phone call was.
She knew whose reach extended even into warehouse hiring decisions. Alvera climbed the stairs to her apartment at 6:47 p.m., exhausted from a day of rejection, mentally calculating how many days until they physically removed her belongings to the curb. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and froze. Wilbert Edwards sat in her father's recliner like he'd been carved there, flanked by Marcus Kane's standing sentinel. The oxygen concentrator hummed in the corner. Her father was at dialysis. She remembered numbly, which meant Edwards had planned this. Had waited for her father's absence. The lamp cast shadows across Edwards' face that made him look like something between a businessman and a predator. Miss Bridgman. His voice was smooth gravel, cultured but dangerous. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Alvera's hand was still on the doorknob. She could run. Should run. But Kane's expression suggested that running would be both futile and fatal. She closed the door and remained standing. I've been told you threw $15,000 at my associate's feet. Edward's eyes were dark, assessing, disturbingly intelligent. Most people who save my life fall into two categories, those who want a reward and those who become liabilities that must be silenced. You rejected both the money and the silence. He leaned forward slightly. You're either extraordinarily brave or catastrophically foolish. I need to determine which. I just want to be left alone. Her voice came out steadier than she felt.
No.
Edwards shook his head. You want justice in a world that doesn't provide it. You want to believe doing the right thing matters. That's why you saved me despite the cost. He gestured to the room, her poverty on full display. Kane tells me you've been blacklisted. No delivery platforms, no job interviews panning out. My nephew Vincent is quite thorough when protecting what he perceives as family interests. Your nephew tried to destroy my life for saving yours. Yes. Edward's smile was cold. Because someone in my organization wanted me dead, Miss Bridgman. That steak was deliberately prepared to create the choking incident. The meat was cut incorrectly, sized specifically to lodge in my airway. My security team was instructed to stand back, to let nature take its course. It was supposed to look like an accident, the old man too proud to admit he needed help, dying while his men watched helplessly. The room felt colder. You're saying someone tried to murder you. I'm saying someone is actively trying to murder me. And when you saved me, you disrupted a carefully orchestrated assassination plot. Edward stood, moving with surprising grace for a man who nearly died 3 days ago. I can't trust my inner circle. My own nephew manages my flagship restaurant, and maybe part of the conspiracy. I need eyes I can trust. Eyes that belong to someone with no stake in my world. Why would I help you? Because I'm offering you $160,000 a year to work as my personal driver. Edwards let that number hang in the air like a grenade. You'll move through my world invisibly, just another service worker no one notices. You'll observe my people, attend my meetings, report directly to me. Your father's medical bills will be covered. Your debt erased. Your record cleaned. And if I refuse? Then you'll be evicted in 9 days. Your father will die because you can't afford his insulin, and you'll spend the rest of your short, miserable life wondering why doing the right thing destroyed you. Edward stepped closer, his presence filling her small apartment. I'm not a good man, Miss Bridgman. I've built an empire on violence and fear. But I have a code. You saved my life when you had every reason not to. That creates a debt. This is how I pay it, by giving you a chance to survive in my world rather than be crushed by it. Your world kills people. Every world kills people. Mine is just more honest about it. Edwards pulled out a business card, placed it on her card table. You'll be entering a place where mercy is seen as weakness, where one wrong move means death, where you'll be hunting a traitor willing to kill. But you'll also be the most protected person in Chicago. No one touches what belongs to me. Alvera looked at the card. A phone number, nothing else. She thought about her father's labored breathing, about the eviction notice, about 3 days of being treated like human garbage for having a conscience. She thought about Edward's strange honor, twisted, violent, but somehow more honest than the legitimate world that had blacklisted her for saving a life. If I do this, she said slowly, I report only what I see. I don't hurt anyone. I don't become part of whatever crimes you're running. Agreed. Edwards moved toward the door, Kane following like a shadow. Kane will pick you up tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring nothing. We'll provide everything you need. What if the person trying to kill you succeeds before I find them? Edwards paused at the threshold, his smile sharp as broken glass. Then you'll have had a very short, very well-paid career. But something tells me you're too stubborn to let me die twice.
The door closed.
Alvera stood alone in her apartment, holding a business card that felt like either a lifeline or a noose. Probably both. Comment, I stand for second chances if you believe people deserve the opportunity to prove themselves. Kane arrived at 7:58 a.m. in a black Mercedes SUV that cost more than Alvera's entire life. He handed her keys, a smartphone still in its box, and 3 garment bags. You start today. Clothes are tailored to your measurements. Phone is encrypted. Only the boss can reach you. The car is yours.
Don't wreck it.
The clothes fit perfectly. Tailored black pants, silk blouses in charcoal and cream, a wool coat that made her old jacket look like a trash bag. The car smelled like leather and power. When Alvera checked the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, polished, professional, invisible in the way that money made you invisible. Not poverty's invisibility, where people looked through you. This was the invisibility of belonging. Edwards emerged from his penthouse at 9 a.m. sharp, moving with the deliberate grace of someone conserving energy. He settled into the back seat like it was a throne. The crimson rose first. Vincent's expecting me. Driving through Chicago in a car that didn't rattle, wearing clothes that didn't advertise her poverty, Alvera felt like an imposter at a costume party where the stakes were her life. Edwards spoke during the drive, his voice low and instructional. Watch for unusual meetings, people who shouldn't be talking, conversations that stop when I enter. Listen to tone more than words. Fear has a frequency. So does guilt. The Crimson Rose looked different in daylight, less fortress, and more theater. Vincent Edwards stood at the host stand reviewing reservations, his face sharp and hungry. When he saw Elvira behind the wheel, his expression curdled into contempt. The delivery girl playing dress-up. Vincent's voice dripped poison as Edwards entered. "Uncle, you can't be serious. She assaulted you, and now she's on payroll." "She saved my life, Vincent. Show some gratitude." Edward's tone was mild, but something dangerous moved beneath it. "She's a liability.
Everyone saw her that night.
She doesn't belong in our world." Vincent's eyes raked over Elvira with naked disdain. "What's next, hiring the busboy to run distribution?" "Miss Bridgman drives. Nothing more." Edwards moved past him toward the office. "Get me this quarter's supplier invoices. All of them." Elvira waited by the car, feeling Vincent's stare like a blade against her spine. He approached, his cologne expensive enough to choke on. "I know what you are. You're the kind of girl who thinks saving someone makes you special. But you're still just help. Remember that before you get ideas about where you fit." The next stop was Azure, a sleek downtown restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Isabella Moretti met them in a private dining room, her appearance as precise as a mathematical equation, tailored burgundy suit, dark hair in a severe bun, eyes that calculated probabilities faster than most people breathed. She was beautiful, the way a knife was beautiful. Wilbert. Isabella's handshake with Edwards was professional, controlled. Her gaze slid to Elvira with clinical interest. "New driver? What happened to Marcus?" "Marcus has other responsibilities. Miss Bridgman is handling my personal transportation." Edwards settled into a chair. "Show me the Midwest Provisions contracts." Isabella's smile never touched her eyes. "Of course." She opened her laptop, angling it away from Elvira's line of sight, a deliberate exclusion. As they discussed supplier costs and distribution schedules, Elvira noticed how Isabella's fingers hesitated over certain invoices, how she redirected conversations away from specific vendors. Edwards noticed too. His questions became sharper, more pointed. In the car afterward, Edwards was quiet until they were blocks away. "Isabella is brilliant. Wharton MBA, could have worked anywhere. She chose my organization because legitimate finance bored her. Now watch how carefully she controls information. That hesitation you saw? She's hiding something." The Madison Room was old money Chicago, dark wood, leather booths, oil paintings of long-dead industrialists. Father Dominic waited in a corner booth, a slight man in his 70s with kind eyes and hands that had clearly broken things. He embraced Edwards like a brother. "Wilbert, thank God you're all right." Dominic's eyes found Elvira. "Is this the young woman Kane told me about?" "Miss Bridgman. She saved my life when my own security stood paralyzed." Edwards gestured for her to join them, the first time anyone had invited her to sit. "Dominic has been with me since we were young men doing stupid things in stupid places. He's the only person I trust without reservation." Dominic studied her with unsettling gentleness. "You did a brave thing. Foolish, but brave. Now you're swimming with sharks who smell blood in the water." "Am I the blood?" Elvira asked. "We all are, child. The question is who's hunting whom." Over the next 2 weeks, Elvira drove Edwards through his empire, 10 restaurants across Chicago, each with different operations, different players, different secrets. She learned to recognize the hierarchy. Vincent controlled distribution and front-of-house operations. Isabella managed all finances and supplier relationships. Dominic served as advisor and confessor. And beneath them, a network of managers, chefs, and associates who treated her with varying degrees of contempt. Vincent's mockery was constant. "Coffee, delivery girl. And try not to assault anyone while you're at it." Isabella's contempt was colder, more analytical. She studied Elvira like a specimen, searching for weaknesses. Only Dominic treated her like a human being, though his kindness felt like a warning. "You don't belong here. Run while you still can." During late-night drives, Edwards educated her in the language of his world. "Vincent meets with the South Side crew every Tuesday. Those meetings used to include me. Now, I'm conveniently excluded." Isabella processes supplier invoices I never see anymore. Small shifts, Miss Bridgman. Death by 1,000 cuts. Why not just confront them? Because I need proof. I need them to show their hand completely. Edwards met her eyes in the rearview mirror. You're not just my driver. You're bait. They'll watch you, assume you're my latest pet project, and they'll get careless. That's when we see who's really trying to kill me. Alvera's hands tightened on the steering wheel. So, I'm the worm on the hook. You're the woman who refused $15,000 and walked into the lion's den anyway. Edward's voice carried something that might have been respect. Now, let's see if the lions are hungry enough to make a mistake. Being invisible was Alvera's oldest skill, refined through years of delivering food to people who never saw her face. Now she weaponized it. While Vincent sneered and Isabella calculated, Alvera perfected the art of being furniture, present but unregistered, her eyes and ears cataloging everything while her face remained blank and forgettable. She noticed patterns. Vincent and Isabella arrived early to meetings, their heads bent together over tablets that snapped shut when Edwards entered. Their conversations had a rhythm, urgent whispers that died the moment Alvera approached with coffee or documents. Isabella's hand would move to her phone protectively. Vincent's jaw would tighten. During a dinner at the Crimson Rose, Alvera waited in the service corridor while Edwards negotiated with Southside distributors. A delivery truck arrived, Midwest Provisions stenciled on its side. The third one that week. She'd watched the kitchen inventory on her walks through. They weren't running low on anything. Yet here came another delivery of premium olive oil, in quantities that could drown the entire restaurant. The driver handed an invoice to the sous chef, who barely glanced at it before signing. Alvera memorized the invoice number. Later, she cross-referenced it against the reservation system dates. Midwest Provisions delivered every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork, always when Isabella was on site to process paperwork, always in quantities that made no operational sense. 2 weeks into her new role, Edwards sent her a text at 11:47 p.m. Crimson Rose. Manager's office.
Pick up contracts from the safe.
Code 8-2-7-3. Use the key I gave you. The restaurant was dark, empty except for the cleaning crew finishing in the kitchen. Alvera's key turned in the lock with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Vincent's office smelled like his cologne and ambition, expensive, suffocating. The safe behind the Rothko print opened smoothly. Inside were the expected contracts, but her flashlight caught something else, a slim folder labeled Midwest Provisions, internal. Alvera photographed every page with her encrypted phone. Invoice after invoice showing costs that made her delivery driver instinct scream. Tomatoes at $47 per pound. Olive oil at $230 per gallon. Flour at $89 per 50-pound bag. Items that should cost a fraction, inflated to obscene levels. And every invoice signed by Isabella Moretti, approved without question. She dug deeper. Midwest Provisions had no website, no public business registry, no location beyond a P.O. box in Gary, Indiana. The corporate filing listed 2 directors, Vincent M. Edwards and Isabella C. Moretti. Alvera's hands shook as she photographed the filing. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was systematic, calculated theft, a shell company draining Edwards' empire one inflated invoice at a time. She replaced everything exactly as she found it, locked the safe, left the office pristine. In the car, she called Edwards. I found it. Midwest Provisions. Vincent and Isabella own it together. They've been billing your restaurants at 10 times market rate for basic supplies. I have documentation. Edward's silence lasted 5 heartbeats. How much? Based on what I saw, millions over the past 2 years, maybe more. Alvera pulled out of the parking lot, checking her mirrors obsessively. They're bleeding you dry and making it look like normal operating costs. Come to the penthouse. Now. 20 minutes later, Alvera sat in Edward's private office while he scrolled through her photographs, his face carved from stone. Father Dominic stood behind him, reading over his shoulder, his kind eyes hardening with each image. They're preparing to take over. Edward's voice was quiet, lethal. Embezzle enough to establish their own capital, eliminate me, and step into the power vacuum as the logical successors. Vincent as the beloved nephew. Isabella as the financial genius who can legitimize the operation. The choking incident. Alvera asked. Vincent manages the kitchen. He could have easily instructed the chef on how to prepare the steak. Edwards looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. You didn't just save my life, Miss Bridgman. You disrupted their entire timeline. Now they're scrambling, trying to determine if I know, if you're a threat, how much time they have left. What happens now? Edward's smile was sharp enough to cut. Now we make them desperate enough to show their full hand. And desperate people make fatal mistakes. Alvera played her role perfectly, the grateful outsider eager to prove her worth. She approached Isabella after a morning meeting at Azure, her voice carefully measured between humble and helpful. Ms. Moretti, I know I'm just the driver, but I used to do data entry before. Everything. If you ever need help organizing files or digitizing invoices, I'm happy to assist. I want to earn my place here. Isabella's eyes flickered with calculation, then something like condescension. How thoughtful. Actually, the Crimson Rose back office is a disaster. Vincent's organizational skills are limited to intimidation. Her smile was surgical. Come by Thursday evening. I'll show you the filing system. Thursday evening, Alvera arrived at the Crimson Rose carrying coffee and the posture of someone who knew her place. Isabella gave her access to the back office computer, a guest login with limited permissions, and showed her folders of supplier invoices that needed to be scanned and categorized. Tedious work. Invisible work.
Perfect.
I have a supplier meeting at 8. Lock up when you're finished. Isabella gathered her laptop, her attention already elsewhere. The system logs out automatically after 30 minutes of inactivity. Alvera worked for an hour, legitimately scanning invoices, establishing her pattern. At 8:47 p.m., she heard voices in the hallway. Isabella returning early. Alvera minimized her work, pulled up a scanning interface, and looked appropriately focused when Isabella glanced in. Still at it? Dedicated. Isabella's tone suggested dedication was for worker bees, not queens. She collected a forgotten folder and left. Alvera waited 20 minutes. The restaurant hummed with dinner service sounds, distant kitchen chaos, muffled conversation from the dining room. She'd watched Isabella input her password twice, her fingers moving in a pattern Alvera had memorized. ISABLL's 1988. Not creative, but effective. She logged out of the guest account, logged in as Isabella. The desktop loaded. Neat folders, professional labels, everything color-coded. Alvera navigated to the Documents folder, scanning for anything that didn't belong. Most folders were exactly what they claimed: invoices, contracts, employee files. Then she saw it, tucked between insurance documentation and lease agreements, a folder called Phoenix Protocol. Alvera's heart hammered as she clicked. Inside were subfolders organized with terrifying precision. Phase 1, Asset Acquisition. Phase 2, Transition Timeline. Phase 3, Succession. She opened Phase 1. Spreadsheets detailing the Midwest Provisions embezzlement scheme. $8.3 million siphoned over 24 months, transferred through 3 shell companies to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Vincent and Isabella owned everything, hidden behind layers of corporate anonymity. Phase 2 showed a timeline. Target elimination was scheduled for March 15th, 2 weeks from now. The method: staged robbery during evening transport. A contract was attached, signed by someone called the Colombo, with a payment schedule: $250,000 upon completion, $100,000 already transferred. Phase 3 was a hit list. 15 names, Edward's most loyal associates, marked for retirement or reassignment. Father Dominic was labeled primary obstacle, terminal solution required. Marcus Kane was marked retain if cooperative, eliminate if resistant. Alvera's hands shook as she photographed everything, the phone's camera shutter clicking in rapid succession. She uploaded the files to the encrypted cloud drive Edwards had set up, watching the progress bar crawl toward completion. Footsteps in the hallway.
Close.
Getting closer. The upload hit 94%. Alvera's breath stopped. The footsteps paused outside the office door. 97%. The door handle turned. 100%. She logged out, pulled up the scanning interface, grabbed a random invoice just as Isabella walked in, her expression sharp with suspicion. Still here? Isabella's eyes swept the room, lingering on the computer screen showing the innocent scanning program. Almost done. Just 3 more boxes. Alvera's voice didn't shake. Years of swallowing fear for customer service made lying to dangerous people almost natural. Isabella moved to the desk, her fingers hovering over the mouse. The system didn't log you out? I kept scanning files. Guess that counts as activity. A pause that lasted forever. Then Isabella nodded. Finish up. I need to lock the office. She waited, watching, until Alvera packed up and left. In the car, Alvera's hands finally shook as she called Edwards. I found everything. The whole plan. They're killing you in 2 weeks. If you can't stand backstabbers and traitors like Vincent and Isabella, comment, loyalty over everything. Snakes won't. Alvera knew something was wrong when she found her apartment door ajar at 7:23 a.m. Inside looked like a hurricane had been given a vendetta. Drawers emptied, mattress slashed, her father's medical documents scattered across the floor like confetti. Her laptop was gone. And arranged carefully on the kitchen table, impossible to miss, were printed photos of her father. Entering the dialysis center, sitting in the waiting room, walking to his car. A message written in Sharpie across the top photo. We know where he is.
Her phone rang.
Her father, his voice thin with fear. Alvera, some men came to the center this morning.
They asked the nurses about you.
What's happening? Dad, listen carefully. Don't go home. Stay with Uncle Raymond. I'll call you tonight. She hung up before he could argue, her hands shaking with rage that tasted like copper. They knew. Vincent and Isabella knew she'd found the Phoenix Protocol. That evening, Edward's text was terse. Crimson Rose. 8 p.m. Private dining room. Mandatory attendance. No explanation. No reassurance. Alvera arrived to find the private dining room filled with the entire organization, every manager, every associate, every person who mattered in Edward's empire. The energy was wrong, charged with something between anticipation and bloodlust. Edward sat at the head of the table looking diminished, older, his composure cracked. Vincent stood at the opposite end, radiating controlled fury. Thank you all for coming on short notice. Vincent's voice carried the authority of someone who'd already won. We have a serious threat within our organization. A federal informant. His eyes locked on Alvera. Miss Bridgman, would you care to explain why you've been surveilling FBI field offices? He threw photos across the table. Alvera in front of the federal building on Dearborn. Outside the Dirksen building. Near the FBI Chicago field office. All real photos. All taken when she'd been delivering food to nearby offices. Those are from my delivery routes. Encrypted communications to federal handlers. Isabella stood, her tablet displaying message logs. Coded language discussing pickups and drops at specific times and locations. The messages were from her delivery apps, DoorDash notifications, Uber Eats instructions, stripped of context and made sinister. Vincent continued, his performance perfect. We also have testimony from a confidential source that Miss Bridgman was recruited 6 months ago to infiltrate our organization. The choking incident? Staged to gain Wilbert's trust. That's insane. Alvera's voice cracked. I saved his life. You assaulted him to create a debt. Isabella's tone was clinical, surgical. Then you refused payment because accepting would have compromised your federal cover. And yesterday, you accessed my personal files without authorization. She produced bank records bearing Alvera's name. We found $40,000 deposited into your account, money stolen from our safe 2 days ago. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Faces that had been merely contemptuous turned murderous. Someone shouted about federal rats. Someone else demanded immediate action. Alvera looked to Edwards, desperate for him to speak. to defend her. But he sat silent, his face gray, his hands trembling slightly on the table. He looked broken, compromised, weak. "Uncle Wilbert." Vincent's voice carried false concern. "You've been under tremendous stress. Your judgment has been compromised. This woman has systematically manipulated you, and now our entire organization is at risk. I'm calling for an emergency vote to transfer operational control until you've recovered." Marcus Kane appeared at Alvera's side, his massive hand gripping her arm. "Come with me."
Now.
He dragged her toward the back room, the same room where they'd thrown her out after she saved Edward's life. Alvera's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. They were going to execute her for discovering the truth. Kane shoved her into the room, closed the door. But instead of pulling his gun, he leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "The boss says trust him. This is the trap. Stay quiet." "What? Quiet?" Kane's eyes were urgent. "Vincent's about to take the bait. Everything's going according to plan." Through the door, Alvera heard Vincent's voice rising with righteous anger. "We need leadership that isn't compromised by sentiment. I move that we remove Wilbert from operational authority and—" The doors burst open with a crash that silenced the room. And everything changed. Wilbert Edwards walked through those doors like a king reclaiming his throne, not the diminished, broken man from moments ago, but the architect in full command. Kane and Father Dominic flanked him, and between them, head high despite her terror, walked Alvera. Vincent's face drained of color. Isabella's calculated composure cracked for the first time. "Please continue, Vincent." Edward's voice cut through the silence, like a blade. "You are calling for a vote?" He moved to the head of the table with deliberate grace. "I've been waiting to hear this speech. The weak uncle. The compromised judgment. The federal infiltration." His smile was surgical. "Quite a performance. Almost believed it myself." "Uncle, what?" "I've been feigning weakness for 6 weeks, Vincent. Every trembling hand, every moment of confusion, every decision that made me look vulnerable, calculated." Edwards gestured to Alvera. "Miss Bridgman, if you would." Alvera's hands shook as she connected her laptop to the projection screen. The Phoenix Protocol file appeared, massive and damning. She began presenting systematically, her voice steadier than she felt. "Midwest Provisions, registered in Gary, Indiana. Owners, Vincent M. Edwards and Isabella C. Moretti." The corporate filing filled the screen. Vincent stood frozen. Isabella's hand moved toward her phone. Kane was already there, removing it from her grip with professional efficiency. 24 months of embezzlement. Alvera clicked through invoices, each more inflated than the last. Tomatoes at $47 per pound. Olive oil at $230 per gallon. Total theft, $8.3 million, transferred through shell companies to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The room erupted in fury, not at Alvera, but at Vincent and Isabella. Associates who'd been ready to execute her moments ago now understood the real betrayal. The timeline. Alvera's next slide showed Phase 2. Target elimination scheduled for March 15th. Method: staged robbery. Contract with an assassin called the Colombo. Payment: $250,000. She clicked again. Vincent's communications with the hitman filled the screen, including surveillance photos of Edwards, of his routes, of his vulnerabilities. And finally, Alvera's voice went cold. The elimination list. 15 loyal associates marked for death once Vincent and Isabella took control. The names appeared. Father Dominic's entry read, "Primary obstacle, terminal solution required." Dominic's kind face hardened into something ancient and dangerous. Around the table, 15 men who'd just seen their own death sentences stared at Vincent and Isabella with murder in their eyes. "In our world," Edwards said quietly, "betrayal has one answer." The room tensed, waiting for the order that would mean Vincent and Isabella's immediate execution. "But I've decided on a different path." Edward's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "For 18 months, I've been cooperating with federal authorities. Every legitimate business in my portfolio, The restaurants, the real estate, the hospitality ventures, now operates cleanly. In exchange for my cooperation in dismantling the criminal operations, those businesses receive immunity. The back doors exploded inward. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons drawn, voices barking orders. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Vincent lunged for the exit. Kane clotheslined him with casual brutality. Isabella remained frozen, her brilliant mind finally encountering a calculation she couldn't solve. Vincent Edwards, Isabella Moretti, you're under arrest for RICO violations, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything, cuffed them personally. Vincent screamed as they dragged him toward the door, his composure shattered completely. You're dead, you little bitch. You're a walking corpse. I'll find you. She's untouchable now. Edward's voice cut through Vincent's rage like a guillotine. Miss Bridgman is family. And family is protected by everything I have left. Isabella said nothing as they took her away, but her eyes promised that some debts could never be paid, some vengeance never satisfied. Alvera met that stare without flinching. She'd stopped being afraid of people who treated mercy as weakness. As the FBI cleared the room, leaving only Edward's inner circle, Father Dominic approached Alvera. You saved his life twice now, child. Once from choking, once from his own blood. He made the sign of the cross over her, blessing or warning. She couldn't tell. God help you with what comes next. For months later, Wilbert Edwards was dying. Not from Vincent's betrayal or a hitman's bullet, but from the pancreatic cancer he'd been hiding for 18 months. The penthouse overlooking Chicago felt hollow now, stripped of its criminal machinery, reduced to what it had always been beneath the empire, just a man's home, quiet and waiting for the end. Alvera sat across from him in the study where he'd once commanded an underworld. Edwards looked smaller now, the disease carving him down to essentials, but his eyes still burned with that same unsettling intelligence. The choking incident didn't create my plan, he said, his voice paper-thin. It accelerated it. I'd been liquidating for 2 years, converting blood money into legitimate businesses. The restaurants, the real estate, the hospitality ventures. All clean now. He gestured to documents spread across the desk. $4.8 billion in legal assets. And a culinary training foundation for kids like you, the ones crushed by poverty who deserve a pathway out. Why are you telling me this? Because you're inheriting it. All of it. The will reading happened in the same law office where Edwards had once negotiated immunity deals with federal prosecutors. His remaining family members filled the room, cousins, nephews, associates who'd survived the purge, all wearing expensive suits and expressions of barely concealed rage. The attorney's words fell like hammer blows. Alvera Bridgman is named sole executor and controlling trustee of the Edwards Legacy Hospitality Group. The room erupted. Accusations of manipulation, threats of legal challenges, promises of retribution. But Edwards' attorney was unmoved. The will was ironclad. Alvera's mandate was clear: complete the transformation, ensure the family never returned to organized crime, and create opportunities for people who'd been denied them. Edwards died that night with Alvera holding his hand, his final words barely a whisper. Make them better than I was. 1 week later, Alvera stood in the Crimson Rose's private dining room facing the hostile family, no longer the poor delivery driver in stained clothes, but the iron-willed guardian of a criminal's redemption. She wore the power Edwards had left her like armor. Wilbert gave you all one chance at legitimacy and prosperity, she said, her voice carrying the weight of $4.8 billion and the ghost of a man who'd chosen mercy over dynasty. Honor that and you'll thrive. Betray it, and I'll use every resource he left me to destroy you. She walked through the main dining room where she'd once saved a dying man. The staff and patrons parted like water. No longer invisible. Impossible to ignore. Hit subscribe if you believe redemption is possible and second chances matter. Only cynics and cold hearts won't.